Life is short. The clock ticks relentlessly, and every second you spend living for someone else's expectations steals a piece of your own happiness. Emma had spent 32 years trying to fit into molds that were never hers, pleasing her parents, impressing colleagues, and following a path that society declared was right. She had a good job, a respectable apartment, and a life that looked perfect on Instagram, but inside, she felt hollow, like a bird trapped in a golden cage. One rainy evening, as she walked home from work, drenched and exhausted, she saw an old man sitting on a park bench, sketching the city skyline with calm precision. His hair was silver, his hands trembled slightly, but his eyes sparkled with a quiet joy. Curious, Emma stopped. "Excuse me," she asked, "don't you get cold sitting out here?" He looked up and smiled, revealing a face full of stories. "I've been cold, and I've been hot. I've been rich, I've been poor. But I've never been happier than when I'm doing exactly what I want, right here, right now." Emma frowned. "But aren't you lonely?" "Lonely?" He laughed softly, the sound like wind through autumn leaves. "I used to be, when I worried about what everyone else thought. But then I realized the people who love me will stay, the rest, their opinions don't define me." His words hit her like a lightning strike. She realized she had spent decades collecting approval from people who barely knew her soul. She had ignored the whispers of her own heart, the dreams she once scribbled in notebooks and buried in drawers. The longing to travel, to paint, to speak her truth, it was still there, dormant, waiting for permission to bloom. The next morning, Emma didn't go to the office. She packed a small bag, left a note on her desk, and boarded a train with no destination in mind. For the first time in years, she felt the pulse of her own life. Each town she visited, each stranger she met, reminded her that living for herself was not selfish, it was survival. She met a young woman in a cafe who had quit her high-paying corporate job to open a bookstore. She met a musician playing on a street corner, whose songs told stories of heartbreak, triumph, and unbridled freedom. Each encounter was a mirror, reflecting the life Emma had been too scared to claim. One night, sitting under a blanket of stars, Emma understood a simple truth. The world does not reward those who live for others, it rewards those who live fully for themselves. She made a promise to herself that she would never again shrink to fit expectations, never again silence the desires that made her soul sing. She would take risks, speak truths, chase dreams, and embrace the uncertainty of life with courage and grace. The hardest part was leaving fear behind, the fear of judgment, of failure, of disappointing others. But she discovered that fear loses its grip the moment you choose yourself. With each step she took, each decision made from love for her own life, the cage that had confined her for decades crumbled into dust. Emma's story is not extraordinary in the way the world defines it. She did not amass wealth or fame. But she did something far braver. She reclaimed herself. She reminded herself and everyone she met that life is too short to be small, too precious to live in someone else's shadow. And in that freedom, she found something even more powerful than happiness. She found peace. The peace that comes not from pleasing others, but from honoring the voice inside that has been whispering your true purpose all along. As the days turned into weeks, Emma discovered the beauty of waking up without an alarm clock set to someone else's schedule. She wandered through streets lined with markets, where the scent of fresh bread mingled with the laughter of children. She sat by rivers, watching the sunlight ripple across water, realizing that life had always been moving forward. She had simply been watching it from behind a window, afraid to step outside. One afternoon, she stumbled upon a small art studio tucked between two cafes. The walls were covered with canvases of every color, some abstract, some painfully precise. A man with paint-stained hands noticed her lingering by the door and waved her inside. "You don't have to paint," he said with a gentle smile. "But if you want to, you can." Something inside Emma shifted. She had not painted since college, but she picked up a brush and felt the old thrill return, the rush of creating something that belonged solely to her. Colors blended and clashed under her hands, forming shapes that told stories she had kept hidden even from herself. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not by others, but by the reflection of her own soul. That evening, as she walked home with paint still smudged on her fingers, she realized that living for herself was not a single act of rebellion. It was a series of small choices, repeated daily, until they became the rhythm of life. She chose to speak when she felt the truth, to pause when she needed rest, to explore when curiosity called, and to love herself even when the world did not. She remembered the colleagues who had criticized her for taking risks, the friends who had questioned her choices, and the family who had insisted she follow a stable path. None of it mattered now. Stability, she realized, was not about following a prescribed route. It was about feeling grounded in your own authenticity. And nothing in the world could shake someone who had anchored themselves in their own truth. As she traveled further, Emma met a man named Daniel, a quiet traveler who had left a high-profile career to study wildlife. They shared stories around campfires, laughed under the stars, and exchanged silences that felt fuller than conversation. He told her about the day he had realized he was living someone else's life, the day he had walked away from a boardroom and never looked back. His courage mirrored hers, and together, they discovered the joy of being fully alive. Emma began documenting her journey, not for social media likes, but as a testament to herself. She wrote letters she never sent, captured moments in photographs she never posted, and recorded the lessons she learned in a journal that became a map of her awakening. Each entry reminded her that fear is temporary, but regret can last a lifetime. She recalled the old man on the park bench, whose simple wisdom had set this journey in motion. She thought about how easily she could have dismissed him, how easily she could have chosen the familiar cage over the uncertain freedom outside. And she realized that the people who leave the deepest impact are often the ones who challenge us to confront the truth we keep buried. One night, alone on a quiet hillside, she looked at the city lights in the distance and whispered to herself, "I will never again live for anyone but me." The words felt like a vow, a prayer, and a promise wrapped into one. She knew life would still throw obstacles, that fear and doubt would occasionally knock on her door. But she had learned to greet them with curiosity instead of submission, with courage instead of avoidance. Emma's journey was not without pain. She missed family gatherings, old friends, and the comfort of predictability. But she understood that these were the sacrifices demanded by a life fully lived. She no longer feared being misunderstood because she had learned the truth. Those who matter will celebrate your courage, and those who do not were never meant to walk beside you anyway. Months passed, and Emma became a different person, not because the world changed, but because she had changed. Her laughter became louder, her steps lighter, her eyes brighter. She noticed details she had overlooked before, the way sunlight streamed through leaves, the rhythm of a city waking up, the quiet resilience in strangers' eyes. Every moment became precious because she knew how fleeting life is, and how dangerous it is to waste it chasing approval instead of joy. One morning, as she sat on a bench overlooking a tranquil lake, a young woman approached her and asked, "How do you do it? How do you live so freely?" Emma smiled, remembering the old man on the park bench, remembering herself at the beginning of this journey. "I stopped living for everyone else," she said softly. "I stopped letting fear dictate my life. And most importantly, I started listening to the voice inside me that had been whispering all along. That voice knows your truth better than anyone else ever will. Trust it." The young woman nodded, her eyes wide, and walked away with a new sense of possibility. Emma watched her go and felt a surge of gratitude. Freedom, she realized, is contagious. When one person chooses themselves, it inspires others to do the same. And in that moment, Emma understood the ultimate lesson. Life is not a rehearsal. Every day is real, every choice matters, and every heartbeat is an opportunity to claim the life you were meant to live. Living for others is easy, comforting, and safe, but it is also a cage. True courage is choosing yourself over and over, in a world that will constantly try to pull you back into shadows. She took a deep breath, feeling the wind on her face, the sun on her shoulders, and the pulse of her own life humming beneath her skin. She smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because she was finally, irrevocably, alive. As Emma moved forward, she realized that living fully for herself was not a destination but a practice, a daily commitment to honor her own truth. She began waking early to watch the sunrise, feeling the first rays of light spill over the horizon like a promise. She wrote freely, painted wildly, and sometimes just sat quietly, letting the rhythm of the world wash over her. Each day became an affirmation. She would not shrink, she would not hide, she would not apologize for the life she wanted to live. She discovered new towns, each with its own stories and rhythms, each offering lessons she never could have learned from books or lectures. In one small coastal village, she met an elderly woman who had spent decades running a tiny bakery. "I never married," the woman said with a twinkle in her eye. "I had no one to impress, no life to compare to. I just baked bread and made people smile. And do you know what? I am happier than I ever could have been if I had followed the crowd." Emma nodded, feeling a surge of recognition. Happiness, she realized, was never in approval or accolades. It was in the quiet courage to choose oneself, in the willingness to defy expectations, in the ability to follow a heart that often seemed reckless but was always honest. She began to understand that fear is not the opposite of courage, it is its companion. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is moving forward despite it. Her journey was not without moments of doubt. There were nights when loneliness pressed against her chest, when she missed the familiarity of her old life. There were moments when she questioned whether she had been selfish or reckless. But each time, she reminded herself of the cost of complacency, the years lost living someone else's story, the silent despair that had once haunted her. And each time, she chose herself. In a bustling city she had never visited before, she stumbled upon a street musician playing a violin that seemed to cry with longing and joy at the same time. She stood there for hours, feeling the music seep into her bones. A crowd gathered, yet Emma felt as if the music was speaking directly to her, reminding her that beauty exists everywhere for those who are awake enough to notice it. In that moment, she realized that living for herself did not mean isolating herself. It meant connecting deeply, meaningfully, with the world on her own terms. She started teaching art classes in small community centers, not for money or recognition, but to share the joy of creation. Watching others rediscover their own voices sparked something profound in her. She realized that living authentically is a gift, not just to oneself but to everyone who crosses your path. The more she gave of herself, the more she felt alive. It was paradoxical. Freedom was not about selfishness but about generosity, about showing up fully in every encounter. One evening, as the sky blazed orange and pink, Emma sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean. She thought about the years she had spent living under invisible chains, about the people who had doubted her, about the paths she had feared to take. And she laughed, a full, uninhibited laugh that echoed across the waves. For the first time, she felt the weight of those years lift. She had lost time, yes, but she had found herself. Emma began recording her experiences, writing motivational reflections, and sharing them online. But she did not write for validation. She wrote for the people who were silently trapped in their own cages, who needed someone to show them that another way is possible. Messages started pouring in from strangers who felt inspired to take their first steps toward living for themselves. Each message was a reminder that courage is contagious, that one life lived fully can spark countless others. She traveled to mountains, deserts, and forests, sometimes alone, sometimes with newfound friends who had also broken free from societal expectations. Each journey tested her limits and expanded her understanding of what life could be. She learned to climb higher, to walk longer distances, to endure discomfort, and to embrace the unknown. And in every challenge, she felt the exhilaration of choosing herself over fear, desire over doubt, life over stagnation. Emma also began to forgive, not only herself for years lost to other people's approval, but also those who had tried to confine her. Forgiveness was not about excusing the past, it was about freeing herself from it. She realized that resentment is a chain, and letting go is an act of courage as profound as stepping into a new life. With each forgiveness, her steps became lighter, her heart more open, her vision clearer. In the quiet moments, Emma reflected on the simple truth that had sparked this entire journey. Life is too short to live for anyone else. Every heartbeat is a choice. Every sunrise is a chance. Every decision to honor your own path is a rebellion against fear, against conformity, against the invisible expectations that weigh down so many lives. She understood that people will always have opinions, that some will misunderstand, and some will resist. But their judgments no longer held power over her. She watched children play in the streets, couples arguing and laughing, strangers helping strangers, and she understood that life does not wait for anyone. Waiting, conforming, shrinking, these are choices too, and they carry their own consequences. She felt gratitude for the courage she had found, for the mistakes that taught her, for the freedom that had been hard-won. Emma's journey had transformed her from a woman who had lived in the shadows into one who moved boldly in the light. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, her voice carried conviction, and her presence radiated a quiet authority born from lived truth. She knew now that living for others is easy, predictable, safe, but it is a slow death. Living for oneself is terrifying, uncertain, risky, but it is the only path to truly being alive. And so she continued walking, continuing painting, continuing speaking, continuing sharing, continuing choosing herself every single day. With every sunrise, every journey, every encounter, she reaffirmed the lesson she had learned with her whole being. Life is too short to be small, too precious to be wasted, and too fleeting to live for anyone but yourself. Emma's days began to blur into a rhythm of exploration, reflection, and creation. Each morning, she woke with the intent to notice the small wonders that most people overlooked: the gentle sway of a tree in the breeze, the way sunlight caught the edges of a window pane, the soft murmur of water against rocks. She found that when you live for yourself, every detail of life becomes magnified, alive with meaning. Even the simplest acts, a shared smile with a stranger, a handwritten note to a friend she had recently met, a quiet hour spent painting, felt like profound celebrations of existence. In a bustling city plaza, Emma encountered a group of street performers whose lives seemed to be defined by the same kind of freedom she craved. They welcomed her into their circle, showing her how to dance with abandon, to sing with vulnerability, to perform with courage. She laughed until her sides ached, realizing how long it had been since she had allowed herself to feel this unrestrained joy. Here, among strangers who had chosen authenticity over convention, Emma felt a sense of belonging that had eluded her in her previous, carefully curated life. Traveling further, she came across a small village where people lived with an almost poetic simplicity. They farmed, they crafted, they celebrated together without the pressure of societal expectations. Emma stayed with a family who treated her as one of their own, teaching her skills she had never imagined herself capable of: baking bread from scratch, weaving baskets, tending to gardens. In those moments, she understood that life's richness does not come from accumulation or recognition, but from engagement, from the joy of using your hands, your mind, your heart fully. One evening, as she helped the family prepare a meal, she noticed a young boy watching her quietly. He seemed hesitant, almost fearful of being wrong. Emma crouched beside him and asked, "Do you like drawing?" The boy nodded, eyes wide with curiosity. She handed him a piece of paper and a pencil, encouraging him to draw anything he wanted. He hesitated at first, then began sketching with a careful intensity. Watching him, Emma realized that part of her purpose was now clear: to inspire others to break free from fear, just as she had. Freedom is contagious, and the courage to choose oneself can ripple outward in ways no one can predict. Emma's nights were filled with reflection. She would sit under stars so brilliant they seemed to pulse with life, writing letters she would never send, recording her thoughts in journals that were becoming treasures of her soul. She wrote about fear and courage, about the weight of living for others and the liberation of living for oneself. She wrote about love, not romantic love, but the fierce, unwavering love for the self that she had long denied. And with each word, she felt lighter, freer, more awake to the miracle of simply being alive. She also began to confront the shadows of her past. Memories of colleagues' criticisms, friends' betrayals, and family pressures came back, but she no longer shied away from them. Instead, she examined each memory, acknowledged the pain it had caused, and chose to release it. Forgiveness became a daily practice, not for others, but for herself. In letting go of resentment, she discovered an inner strength she hadn't known existed. The more she freed herself from the weight of others' expectations, the higher she soared in her own life. In a small coastal town, Emma met a woman who had spent years caring for others at the expense of herself. Her hair was streaked with gray, her hands calloused from work, but her eyes held a quiet sorrow. "I never learned to say no," she confessed. "I never learned to take my own needs seriously." Emma shared her own journey, and for the first time in a long while, she saw the woman's eyes light up with hope. She realized that living for oneself is not selfish, it is necessary, and it can inspire others to reclaim their lives too. Emma also began to explore her creative passions in ways she had never dared before. She held small exhibitions of her paintings, organized impromptu storytelling sessions in cafes, and even tried her hand at public speaking, sharing her story with those who wanted to listen. Each time, the fear of judgment crept in, but each time she pushed through, remembering that the life she wanted was worth more than the fleeting discomfort of others' opinions. Over time, Emma noticed subtle but profound changes within herself. She no longer felt the compulsive need to explain or justify her choices. She no longer measured her worth by external markers of success. She moved through life with a quiet confidence, a sense of alignment between her inner desires and her outward actions. Even in moments of uncertainty, she felt grounded, because she knew that she was finally living in accordance with her own truth. Her encounters with people from all walks of life deepened her understanding of human courage and resilience. She met travelers who had abandoned lucrative careers to pursue art, writers who had risked everything to tell their stories, and ordinary people who had quietly chosen authenticity over conformity. Each encounter reminded her that the desire to live fully and freely is universal, and that courage manifests in countless ways, both grand and subtle. Emma's journey also strengthened her empathy. She began to understand that everyone is fighting battles unseen, carrying burdens others cannot perceive. Living for oneself does not mean ignoring others. It means choosing love over fear, clarity over confusion, and integrity over pretense. And when you live this way, you naturally attract relationships that are authentic, nourishing, and mutually uplifting. As the seasons changed, Emma reflected on how far she had come. The woman who once trembled at the thought of disappointing others had transformed into someone who embraced uncertainty, celebrated spontaneity, and cherished her own voice. Life was still unpredictable, challenges still arose, but she no longer feared them. She welcomed them as opportunities to grow, to learn, and to deepen her understanding of what it means to truly live. Emma understood that life is a fleeting gift, a fragile yet brilliant flame. Choosing oneself is not an act of vanity, it is an act of survival, a declaration that your existence matters. Every sunrise, every heartbeat, every decision to honor one's own desires is a rebellion against the mediocrity of living for others. And in that rebellion, in that daily choice to reclaim her life, Emma found a freedom that could not be taken, a peace that could not be shaken, and a joy that could not be contained. With every step forward, she carried the truth she had uncovered. The world will always have expectations, fears, and doubts, but they only have power if you allow them. Life is too short to shrink, too precious to waste, and too fleeting to live for anyone but yourself. Emma had chosen herself, and in doing so, she had unlocked a life of beauty, courage, and endless possibility. Emma had begun to notice how different her perception of time had become. Where once she had measured life in deadlines and obligations, she now measured it in moments. Moments of awe, moments of connection, moments of unfiltered joy. She lingered in sun-dappled forests, listening to the wind threading through the leaves, and allowed herself to watch storms roll across mountains without a single thought about productivity. The world seemed larger, more intricate, and infinitely more alive than she had ever realized. One morning, she found herself on the edge of a cliff overlooking the ocean, waves crashing far below. The sheer scale of nature humbled her, reminding her how small, yet how significant, each individual life truly is. She closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and whispered a silent promise to herself, to never allow fear, expectation, or doubt to dictate her path again. To live each day intentionally, with courage and heart. To be unapologetically herself. In the months that followed, Emma sought out experiences that pushed her limits, daring herself to confront fears she had long avoided. She hiked through dense jungles, learning to trust her instincts. She took a sailing course, navigating choppy waters under relentless sun and wind. She volunteered at a wildlife sanctuary, learning patience, empathy, and humility from creatures who lived simply but fully. Every challenge reminded her that growth often comes cloaked in discomfort, and that the life she wanted required risk. She also began mentoring others who felt trapped by expectations. She met young professionals overwhelmed by pressure, parents lost in routines, and artists paralyzed by self-doubt. She listened to their stories, offered gentle guidance, and shared her own journey. Emma had come to understand that living fully is not about isolation or rebellion against society. It is about authenticity, and authenticity inspires authenticity. By choosing herself, she was creating ripples of courage, encouraging others to do the same. One evening, she attended a community gathering in a small town she had visited. People shared their stories of struggle and triumph, of fear and courage. Emma listened intently, feeling the connection of shared humanity. When it was her turn, she spoke simply, from her heart, "Life is too short to be small. Too precious to live for anyone but yourself. The world will always have expectations, but your life is yours to shape. Courage is not the absence of fear, It is choosing yourself despite fear. And when you do, you will find freedom, joy, and a depth of fulfillment you never imagined. Her words were met with silence at first, and then a ripple of applause. She noticed tears in the eyes of some, smiles of recognition in others. She realized that what she had once thought was personal liberation was actually universal. Everyone carries the yearning to live fully, but most are held back by fear and conditioning. Her journey had not only freed her, it had become a beacon for others. Emma began to travel with intention, seeking stories that inspired her and experiences that expanded her understanding of life. She attended festivals of art and music in far-off countries, joined meditation retreats in remote mountains, and explored cultures with deep respect and curiosity. In each encounter, she learned that living fully is not a singular act. It is a mosaic of choices, moments, and lessons, stitched together with courage and love. She also confronted old relationships with compassion and clarity. Friends who had once criticized her choices were met with honesty. Emma no longer needed approval. Family members who had pressured her were approached with understanding, yet boundaries were firmly drawn. Living fully, she realized, also means knowing when to step away from toxicity, when to protect your energy, and when to choose growth over comfort. Emma's creative pursuits flourished in ways she had never anticipated. Her paintings, once timid and restrained, became bold expressions of her soul. Colors clashed and harmonized on canvas, telling stories of fear, hope, pain, and joy. She began hosting workshops, sharing her methods of self-expression, and encouraging others to paint their truth. Each brushstroke, she realized, was an act of claiming herself, an assertion that her life, her choices, and her voice mattered. One day, in a quiet village by a river, Emma encountered a young girl who had stopped singing because of ridicule. Emma invited her to sing, assuring her that her voice was beautiful simply because it was hers. The girl's tentative notes grew into a clear, vibrant melody. Emma watched her with tears in her eyes, recognizing the profound power of choosing oneself, and helping others find the courage to do the same. She understood then that her journey was not just about freedom, it was about awakening, transformation, and the ripple effect of courage. Even in solitude, Emma found profound joy. She walked alone through ancient forests, swam in crystal lakes, and camped under the stars, feeling a connection to the universe that she had never felt before. Solitude became her teacher, showing her patience, reflection, and the depth of her own inner strength. She realized that true companionship begins with being fully present with oneself. The more she embraced her own company, the more authentic her relationships became. Months turned into years, and Emma's life became a tapestry of vibrant experiences, deep connections, and unwavering self-honesty. She no longer feared the judgments of others, nor the uncertainty of the future. Life, she discovered, was not about control or approval. It was about presence, courage, and the relentless pursuit of authenticity. Every choice she made was infused with intention, every day lived with mindfulness, and every encounter approached with openness and love. Emma finally understood a truth that had eluded her for decades. Life is not meant to be a rehearsal. Waiting, shrinking, and bending for others only delays the inevitable. Your own longing, your own voice, your own path. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It is essential. Every sunrise offers a chance to reclaim your life, to step boldly into the unknown, and to embrace the freedom that comes with living fully. And as she stood on a cliff one morning, watching the first light spill across the horizon, Emma felt a profound sense of peace. She had walked a path that was uncertain, difficult, and exhilarating. She had risked fear, released expectations, and reclaimed her life. And in doing so, she had discovered the ultimate reward, the freedom to live fully, unapologetically, and fiercely for herself. Emma's journey took on a new depth as she began to see life not as a series of obstacles but as an intricate tapestry of opportunities. Every person she met, every path she took, became a mirror reflecting parts of herself she had long ignored. She discovered that freedom was not a single, grand moment. It was a collection of choices, made consistently, over and over, even when it felt uncomfortable. One morning, she found herself in a quiet desert town, the air shimmering with heat and possibility. The sand stretched endlessly, and the horizon seemed to hold every dream she had ever buried. There, she met an elder who had spent decades wandering the desert alone, living off the land and listening to the wind. He spoke softly, "The world will always try to define you, to put you in a box. But the desert teaches you something the cities cannot, that the only true measure of life is your own courage to live it. His words settled into her soul like water into thirsty soil. She realized that courage is not always dramatic. Often, it is quiet, patient, and persistent. It is choosing yourself in subtle ways, speaking your truth, following your heart, and allowing your own desires to guide your steps. Every choice to honor her inner voice was a victory, a rebellion against a world that constantly asks you to shrink. As she wandered the desert, Emma came across a group of nomadic artists who traveled from town to town, painting murals on abandoned walls. They welcomed her into their circle, and for the first time, Emma painted not for expression, not for documentation, but for sheer joy. Her hands moved instinctively, blending colors and textures in ways she never imagined. Each stroke felt like a declaration. I am here. I belong to myself. I am free. She began to document her journey more intentionally, not for an audience but as a map of transformation. Her journal overflowed with stories of courage, gratitude, and revelation. She wrote about the people who had inspired her, the landscapes that had humbled her, and the moments that had shaken her to the core. She realized that living fully is not about seeking perfection but about embracing imperfection, learning from it, and letting it guide you toward authenticity. Emma's encounters with others deepened her understanding of the human spirit. She met a woman who had left a wealthy, prestigious life to live in a tiny cabin in the mountains, tending goats and writing poetry. She met a man who had abandoned fame to work in remote villages, teaching children to read and dream. Each story reminded her that true fulfillment comes not from what society values but from what nourishes your soul. It reinforced her belief that courage is contagious, and that choosing yourself can inspire others to do the same. She also confronted old patterns of self-doubt. Whenever fear crept in, whispering that she was reckless or undeserving, she faced it head-on. She acknowledged the fear, named it, and then continued forward anyway. She realized that fear only had power when she allowed it to dictate her choices. Courage, she discovered, is not the absence of fear, it is moving forward in spite of it, step by step, moment by moment. Emma's travels led her to a remote island where the ocean stretched endlessly, meeting the sky at a horizon that seemed infinite. Here, she learned the rhythm of patience and presence. She spent days observing the tides, listening to the birds, and swimming in waters that mirrored the sky. In the solitude, she confronted the parts of herself she had long ignored, the sadness, the longing, the years spent trying to please others. She held each feeling gently, without judgment, and allowed them to exist. In doing so, she discovered a profound inner peace, a quiet strength that required no validation from the outside world. Her interactions with strangers became lessons in empathy and connection. She helped a young man repair a boat, teaching him skills she had learned along the way. She shared meals with families who had little to offer materially but abundant generosity of spirit. She listened to stories of struggle, triumph, love, and loss, recognizing that every life, no matter how small it may seem, carries lessons worth learning. She realized that living fully is not only about personal freedom but also about creating meaningful connections that honor the human experience. Emma's journey was not without setbacks. There were storms she could not control, nights when isolation felt unbearable, and moments when her courage faltered. But each challenge became an opportunity to deepen her resilience. She learned to move with uncertainty rather than against it, to embrace discomfort as a teacher, and to trust her instincts even when logic and fear whispered otherwise. With each trial, her spirit grew stronger, her vision clearer, and her heart wider. She also began to see the subtle ways in which living fully affects others. Children who witnessed her fearlessness began to explore their own passions. Adults inspired by her choices started reclaiming lost dreams. Strangers touched by her words found the courage to speak their truth. Emma realized that choosing oneself is not an isolated act. It sends ripples through the lives of everyone you encounter. By embracing her own life, she was giving permission for others to do the same. In quiet moments, Emma reflected on the journey that had begun with a single question: am I living for myself or for others? She understood now that life is fleeting, and every moment spent shrinking or pleasing others is a moment lost. Freedom, she discovered, is not granted, it is claimed. Courage is not given, it is grown, nurtured, and practiced daily. And the greatest gift of all is the ability to live without apology, to speak your truth, and to honor the voice inside that has always known your purpose. Emma stood at the edge of a cliff one evening, the sun setting in a blaze of gold and crimson. She felt the wind against her face, the pulse of the earth beneath her feet, and the surge of life coursing through her veins. She smiled, fully aware that her journey would never truly end, because living for herself was not a destination but a lifelong practice. Every sunrise would offer new choices, every encounter new lessons, and every heartbeat a chance to reaffirm the truth she had discovered. Life is too short to live for anyone but yourself, and the courage to claim it is the greatest gift one can ever give. As Emma continued her journey, she began to notice a subtle shift within herself, an inner calm that came from knowing she was no longer living under the weight of expectations. Each day became an exercise in mindfulness, a deliberate choice to honor her desires, instincts, and passions. She began rising before dawn, walking barefoot along beaches where the sand was cool and damp, feeling the earth beneath her feet, and listening to the waves crash in their timeless rhythm. She realized that life, when lived fully, is not about chasing approval or recognition. It is about attuning yourself to the beauty and truth that exists in every moment. She met travelers and locals who had chosen paths as unconventional as hers. A young man in a desert village had left a high-powered corporate career to become a potter, shaping clay with patience and love, teaching workshops for children and elders alike. A woman in a mountain town had abandoned fame to care for abandoned animals, finding joy in their trust and companionship. Emma began to understand that courage does not always roar, it sometimes whispers, steady and persistent, in the choices we make every day. Through these encounters, she realized that life is not a checklist of achievements, promotions, or material gains. True fulfillment comes from alignment between what we desire, how we act, and the life we live. It is not enough to dream. Dreams must be pursued with courage, creativity, and authenticity. Every step Emma took toward her own freedom felt like a reclaiming of lost time, a rediscovery of the self she had buried beneath obligation and fear. Emma also began to embrace silence as a teacher. She spent long hours in forests, sitting under ancient trees whose trunks seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries. She observed birds weaving through branches, rivers flowing without resistance, and clouds drifting effortlessly across the sky. In these quiet moments, she felt a profound connection to the world around her, recognizing that life is alive in ways far more intricate than she had ever imagined. Her mind, once cluttered with anxiety and self-doubt, began to quiet, and in that stillness, clarity emerged. She experimented with new forms of creativity, allowing herself to paint, write, and compose music in ways that had previously terrified her. She joined gatherings of artists who encouraged her to explore without judgment, to make mistakes without fear, and to honor the process rather than the outcome. In these spaces, Emma discovered the thrill of vulnerability, the freedom that comes when you release perfectionism and simply allow yourself to exist fully. Traveling deeper into remote regions, Emma encountered people who had found happiness not by acquiring, but by simplifying. They lived in small homes, grew their own food, shared freely with their communities, and celebrated moments rather than possessions. Watching them, Emma understood that living for oneself does not mean isolating or hoarding. It means making conscious choices that nurture your spirit, and in doing so, enriching the lives of those around you. Generosity, she realized, is a natural byproduct of living authentically. Emma began sharing her story openly, not to seek fame or admiration, but to inspire. She hosted intimate gatherings where people shared their fears and aspirations, and she guided them to recognize that fear is often the only thing standing between them and their freedom. She listened deeply, asking questions that helped others uncover the parts of themselves they had neglected, and offering encouragement born from lived experience. Slowly, she built a community of people committed to choosing themselves, even in the face of uncertainty. There were moments when loneliness returned, reminding her that living authentically is not always comfortable. Nights under the stars sometimes felt empty, and days spent alone tested her resolve. Yet each time, she turned inward rather than outward, finding companionship in her own presence. She learned to sit with her fears, to embrace discomfort as a teacher, and to transform solitude into a source of strength. By doing so, she cultivated resilience, a quiet courage that did not waver in the face of challenge. Her journey brought her to a coastal town where the ocean's vastness seemed infinite. She spent hours watching the horizon, contemplating the ebb and flow of life. Here, she met a group of travelers who shared stories of profound transformation. People who had abandoned safety for adventure, security for authenticity, and familiarity for the unknown. Listening to their tales, Emma recognized that her journey was part of a larger truth. The world belongs to those brave enough to choose themselves, no matter the consequences. Emma also learned the importance of gratitude. She began recording not only her experiences, but the small, everyday blessings that had once gone unnoticed. The laughter of children, the kindness of strangers, the simple pleasure of a warm meal, the serenity of a sunset. Gratitude became a lens through which she saw life, amplifying joy and softening challenges. She realized that living fully is not about escaping hardship. It is about embracing every aspect of existence with awareness and appreciation. Through all these experiences, Emma understood that courage is cumulative. Each choice to honor herself, each act of self-expression, each step into the unknown, built upon the last, creating a life of profound richness. She saw that living for oneself is not reckless, it is necessary. Fear will always be present, but it does not have to control decisions. Life rewards those who take ownership, who trust their instincts, and who dare to embrace their own path, however unconventional it may seem. As Emma reflected on her journey, she realized that the woman she had once been, the one bound by obligation, fear, and the expectations of others, was gone. In her place stood someone vibrant, fearless, and alive. She had cultivated a life where passion, purpose, and authenticity intersected, and in doing so, she had discovered a freedom so profound that it reshaped her understanding of everything. Emma now walked each day with intention, gratitude, and a sense of wonder. She knew that life would always present challenges, that fear and doubt would continue to visit, and that external pressures would never fully disappear. Yet none of it could sway her. She had chosen herself, and in that choice, she had found the deepest fulfillment imaginable, a life lived fully, boldly, and unapologetically. Every sunrise reminded her that life is finite, and every sunset reinforced the beauty of embracing it fully. Emma had learned that living for others is easy, predictable, and safe, but it is also limiting, unfulfilling, and fleeting. Living for oneself requires courage, persistence, and honesty, but it is liberating, transformative, and eternal. She understood that her journey would never truly end, because choosing oneself is not a moment, it is a lifelong practice. Each decision, each act of love, each step toward authenticity would continue to shape her life, just as it would inspire countless others. And as she stood on a cliff one evening, watching the horizon glow with the final light of day, she felt the ultimate truth pulse within her. Life is too short to live for anyone but yourself, and the courage to claim it is the greatest gift you can ever give, to yourself and to the world. As Emma moved forward, she began to understand the subtle power of presence. It was not enough to simply choose herself once or twice. Choosing oneself was a constant practice, a conscious decision made every morning, every hour, every minute. She started noticing how much of life had been wasted in autopilot, in fear, in performing roles dictated by others. Now, every moment was intentional. Every word she spoke, every action she took, carried the imprint of her own truth. She traveled to a dense forest, where sunlight filtered through the canopy like shards of gold. Alone among the trees, Emma felt a connection to something larger than herself. The forest seemed to breathe with her, teaching her patience, resilience, and the beauty of being fully alive in the present. She walked barefoot along moss-covered paths, listening to the rhythm of birds, insects, and distant streams, realizing that life has its own natural cadence, and trying to force it to match the expectations of others had only created chaos and dissatisfaction. In a small village nearby, Emma met a craftsman who carved intricate sculptures from wood. He had been rejected by his family for abandoning a traditional career path, yet he radiated a quiet fulfillment she had rarely witnessed. "I am not rich," he said, "but I am wealthy in ways that money cannot measure. I am free, and I am true to myself. That is enough." His words struck a chord deep within her. Emma realized that freedom is often mistaken for extravagance, but in truth, it is far more profound, a life lived authentically, fully, and without apology. Her travels introduced her to people who had faced unimaginable hardships yet had refused to surrender their sense of self. There was a woman who had survived war and displacement, building a life of art and mentorship in a foreign land. There was a man who had lost everything in a fire but had rebuilt a community center where he taught children music and dance. These encounters showed Emma that courage is not always visible. It is often quiet, persistent, and woven into the choices people make to keep moving forward despite fear, pain, or loss. Emma began to journal every experience, recording not only her adventures but the emotional and spiritual insights they brought. She wrote about fear, joy, love, grief, and liberation, realizing that every emotion has value when acknowledged and embraced. She discovered that the act of writing was not simply documentation, it was a form of self-affirmation, a mirror that reflected her growth and her commitment to living fully. One afternoon, she joined a group of travelers on a mountain trek. The journey was grueling, with steep inclines and unpredictable weather. Many struggled, complaining about exhaustion and discomfort. Emma, however, felt a sense of exhilaration she had never experienced in a conventional life. Every step was a testament to her resilience, every breath a celebration of freedom. She encouraged those around her, not with judgment, but with gentle guidance. Pain is temporary. Fear is temporary. This journey is yours. Claim it. By the time they reached the summit, the group was transformed. They laughed, they cried, and they embraced the view with a profound sense of accomplishment. Emma realized then that choosing oneself is not selfish, it elevates everyone around you. Her creativity flourished in ways that surprised her. She began composing music inspired by the places she visited and the people she met. Her melodies captured the essence of freedom, struggle, and joy. She shared her music in local cafes, small theaters, and open-air gatherings. People were drawn to her authenticity, to the raw honesty in her songs, and Emma realized that when you embrace your own life, you naturally inspire others to embrace theirs. Emma also began mentoring others more intentionally. She encountered individuals trapped in jobs they despised, in relationships that drained them, in routines that suffocated their spirits. She listened deeply, helping them uncover the desires they had silenced. Her message was simple yet revolutionary. Life is short. Fear is inevitable. But living for yourself is the most courageous act you can perform. Each person who began to reclaim their own life reinforced Emma's conviction that freedom is not only personal, it is contagious. She faced challenges as well. Sometimes, fear returned, whispering doubts and insecurities. There were days when she questioned her path, wondering if she had abandoned responsibility, if she had been reckless, if she had been selfish. But each time, she returned to the core truth she had discovered. Living for yourself is not a one-time act, it is a lifelong commitment. Every fear faced, every boundary honored, every desire acted upon is a step toward true liberation. In the evenings, Emma often reflected on the journey that had begun with a simple encounter on a rainy park bench. The wisdom of that old man had ignited a fire she did not fully understand at first. Now, years later, she realized that her life had become a testament to the power of choice. Every decision to honor herself, every act of courage, had accumulated into a life she would never trade for safety or conformity. Her days were filled with rich experiences, canoeing across pristine lakes, hiking through snow-dusted mountains, exploring vibrant markets, sharing meals with strangers who became friends. Yet it was not the destinations themselves that mattered, but the way she experienced them, with presence, curiosity, and courage. Every encounter became a lesson, every challenge a teacher, every quiet moment a source of strength. Emma also began to see that the greatest impact of choosing yourself is the inspiration it provides to others. Children she encountered began to pursue creative passions. Adults began to reclaim long-forgotten dreams. Strangers found the courage to speak their truths. She realized that living fully is not only about personal freedom, it is a gift to the world. By being true to yourself, you create a space for others to be free as well. And through it all, Emma continued to grow. She understood that living for yourself is not reckless, it is deliberate. It is not selfish, it is essential. It is not a path free of fear, it is a journey defined by courage, resilience, and authenticity. She had learned to face challenges with grace, to embrace discomfort as a teacher, to celebrate victories both large and small, and to live every moment with unwavering presence. Every sunrise reminded her that life is finite, and every sunset reinforced the beauty of living fully. She had discovered that fear, doubt, and expectation are inevitable, but they do not have to control you. What matters is the choice to honor your own path, to act with intention, and to embrace the life you were always meant to live. Emma stood one evening at the edge of a cliff, the wind in her hair, the sky ablaze with color. She felt her heartbeat synchronize with the rhythm of the world, her soul resonating with the pulse of life itself. She had come to understand the ultimate truth. Life is too short to live for anyone but yourself, and the courage to claim it is the greatest gift one can give to oneself and to everyone who witnesses it. As Emma continued on her path, she realized that life's most profound lessons often came in the quietest moments. Early mornings spent watching mist roll across valleys, the smell of rain-soaked earth, the soft hum of cicadas in the evening, all became reminders that living fully is about noticing, appreciating, and participating in life as it unfolds. She no longer measured herself by accomplishments or others' expectations. Instead, she measured her days by depth, presence, and authenticity. Each sunrise became a promise, to act courageously, love freely, and embrace the unknown without hesitation. She began to explore new forms of expression, experimenting with photography, sculpture, and spoken word. Each medium allowed her to capture fragments of her soul, fragments of the world as she perceived it. One day, while photographing an old marketplace in a sunlit village, she captured a child laughing with pure abandon. The photo, when she looked at it later, seemed to convey everything she had been striving toward: freedom, joy, authenticity. Emma realized that creativity was not just an outlet, it was a declaration, a testament to the life she had chosen. During her travels, Emma also encountered moments of unexpected challenge, moments that tested the courage she had cultivated. She found herself in a remote mountain pass during a sudden storm, with icy wind cutting through her clothes and visibility nearly gone. Most would have turned back, seeking safety, but Emma pressed forward, trusting her instincts, listening to the rhythm of her own heart. When she reached the summit hours later, soaked and exhausted, the sense of accomplishment was unlike anything she had experienced. Fear, she understood, is not a barrier but a companion. True courage is moving forward despite it. In a coastal town, Emma met a group of survivors from natural disasters who had rebuilt their lives from nothing. Their resilience and determination inspired her in ways she could not have anticipated. She listened to their stories, helped where she could, and learned that even in devastation, life offers opportunities for rebirth. Each story reinforced her belief that every human being has the capacity to reclaim their life, to choose authenticity over conformity, and to rise above fear and limitation. Emma's reflections deepened as she spent time in solitude. Alone on cliffs, in forests, and beside rivers, she confronted the parts of herself she had once ignored. The self-doubt, the shame, the years spent shrinking to fit expectations. She held these emotions gently, acknowledging them without judgment. In doing so, she discovered a profound strength. That vulnerability is not weakness, but the gateway to freedom. By embracing every part of herself, even the uncomfortable ones, she was living fully in a way that was both courageous and honest. She also began teaching mindfulness and creative expression to small communities she visited. Children and adults alike learned to notice their own thoughts, emotions, and desires, to honor them rather than suppress them. Emma realized that living fully is not a solitary act, it inspires others to awaken as well. Every person she encountered who began to reclaim their voice became a reflection of her own journey, proof that courage and authenticity are contagious. One evening, Emma sat on a quiet beach, watching the waves fold into one another with rhythmic perfection. She thought about all the lives she had touched, all the transformations she had witnessed, and all the inner battles she had faced. She realized that life's true wealth is not measured in possessions or accolades, but in courage, connection, and presence. Choosing oneself is the foundation of this wealth, the starting point from which everything else flows. Emma began to embrace discomfort more fully. She took cold swims in mountain lakes, hiked through dense forests with no clear path, and spoke her truths even when it made others uncomfortable. She discovered that growth often comes dressed as challenge, and that the greatest rewards in life are earned through persistence, resilience, and the willingness to act authentically despite fear. Her relationships also transformed. Friends and companions who had once held her back or doubted her choices faded away naturally, while new bonds, rooted in mutual respect and shared values, flourished. Emma realized that choosing oneself is not about isolation. It is about creating space for authentic connection, relationships that nurture rather than constrain, and interactions that honor each person's individuality. Emma's creativity evolved as well. She began composing music inspired by the landscapes she traveled and the people she met. Each note carried the essence of her journey, the courage, the vulnerability, the joy, and the liberation she had cultivated. Sharing her music became a form of storytelling, a way to convey the message that life is too short to live for others, and that true freedom comes from honoring your own path. As time passed, Emma noticed subtle but profound changes within herself. Her sense of self-worth no longer depended on approval or recognition. She moved with quiet confidence, speaking and acting in alignment with her values. Fear, doubt, and uncertainty still appeared, but they no longer held power over her decisions. She had discovered that true freedom is not the absence of fear, it is the mastery of it, the ability to act authentically despite it. Emma also reflected on the ripple effect of living authentically. Children who witnessed her courage pursued creative passions. Adults inspired by her choices began reclaiming long-forgotten dreams. Communities she touched grew more connected, more courageous, more alive. She understood that her journey was not only personal, it was part of a larger movement, a testament to the transformative power of choosing oneself. She continued to explore, to learn, and to teach. She climbed mountains, sailed rivers, painted murals, and shared stories. Every day became an opportunity to deepen her understanding of life and to live in alignment with her values. She embraced solitude and connection, challenge and triumph, fear and courage. Each experience was a lesson, each encounter a teacher, and each moment a chance to live fully. Emma realized that life is not a rehearsal. Waiting, shrinking, and pleasing others is a slow erosion of the soul. Living for yourself, no matter the uncertainty, is an act of courage that shapes not only your own life but the lives of everyone you touch. Every sunrise brought a new opportunity to reaffirm this truth, every sunset a reminder of the fleeting beauty of existence. Standing once again on a cliff at dawn, Emma felt the wind on her face and the pulse of the world beneath her feet. She smiled, fully aware that her journey would never truly end, because choosing oneself is not a destination, it is a lifelong practice. The courage to live fully, authentically, and unapologetically is the greatest gift one can give, both to oneself and to the world. Emma woke one morning to the soft hum of birdsong filtering through the window of a small cabin she had rented by a serene lake. The air smelled faintly of pine and damp earth, and the surface of the water reflected the pale gold of dawn. She had reached a point in her journey where silence was no longer empty, it was filled with insight, reflection, and a profound sense of presence. Each day, she reminded herself that life is too short to be defined by anyone else's expectations, and she began to notice how that truth transformed every interaction, every decision, every thought. She decided to explore the surrounding wilderness, wandering along paths that seemed both familiar and uncharted. The rustling of leaves beneath her feet, the occasional splash of fish breaking the surface, the distant call of a hawk, all of it reminded her that life was alive, complex, and infinitely precious. She realized that true living requires immersion, attention, and courage. It was not enough to survive or exist. One had to engage fully, to risk discomfort, to be willing to confront fear and uncertainty in order to grow. As she trekked deeper into the forest, Emma encountered a small community of artisans who lived in harmony with the natural world. They welcomed her warmly, offering tea made from herbs grown in their gardens and inviting her to participate in their daily routines. She learned to weave baskets, carve wood, and cultivate vegetables, experiencing firsthand the satisfaction of creation that is deeply rooted in effort, patience, and presence. Watching their lives unfold in simplicity yet with purpose, Emma understood that richness does not lie in wealth, but in authenticity and alignment with one's own values. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma sat with a group of these artisans around a fire. They shared stories of struggle and triumph, of lives marked by choices that defied societal norms. One elder spoke softly, "Happiness is not given. It is claimed, moment, by those brave enough to honor their own path." The words resonated deeply within Emma. She realized that the courage she had cultivated was not just for herself, it was a force capable of inspiring transformation in others. Living fully is not an act of selfishness, it is an invitation for others to awaken to their own potential. Emma's creative expressions flourished in ways she had never imagined. She painted canvases that captured the landscapes of her travels, the faces of people she met, and the emotions she had experienced. Each brushstroke was deliberate, a testament to her commitment to herself and her life. She composed music that echoed the rhythms of the forests, rivers, and mountains she had traversed, sharing it in local gatherings where it resonated deeply with those who listened. Through art, she realized, one could communicate truths that words often failed to convey. During her travels, Emma also began to confront moments of doubt and fear that still emerged. There were days when loneliness pressed heavily upon her, when uncertainty about the future caused her heart to race. But instead of retreating, she leaned into these feelings, observing them without judgment and allowing them to teach her resilience. She learned that fear is not an enemy but a companion, guiding us to greater self-awareness, courage, and clarity. The more she acknowledged it without letting it dominate her, the stronger and freer she became. Emma's interactions with others deepened her understanding of the human experience. She met travelers who had abandoned conventional careers for art, love, or adventure, families who had embraced radical simplicity, and individuals who had rebuilt their lives from ruin. Each encounter reinforced her belief that life is not about following a prescribed path. It is about discovering one's own, even if it means facing uncertainty, criticism, or isolation. Choosing oneself is not easy, but it is the key to living fully. Her journey also revealed the profound impact of mentorship and shared wisdom. Emma began guiding young travelers, helping them recognize the courage within themselves, and encouraging them to pursue paths aligned with their own truths. She saw firsthand how acts of bravery, vulnerability, and authenticity ripple outward, touching lives in ways that are often invisible but immensely powerful. By living fully, she was creating a chain of inspiration that extended far beyond her own experiences. One night, Emma camped under a sky filled with stars so brilliant it seemed the universe itself was leaning close to listen. She reflected on the path that had brought her here, the decisions to stop living for others, the risks taken in pursuit of authenticity, the fear faced and transformed into courage. She realized that freedom is not a destination. It is a practice, a way of engaging with the world with awareness, presence, and intention. Every sunrise was a chance to reaffirm that practice, and every sunset a reminder of the fleeting beauty of life. Emma also discovered that living fully requires balance. She learned to honor her body through movement, nourishment, and rest. She cultivated her mind through reading, reflection, and connection with others. She nurtured her spirit through creativity, solitude, and acts of service. In doing so, she realized that living authentically is holistic. It encompasses every aspect of existence, and it demands attentiveness, courage, and love. As weeks turned into months, Emma's sense of self deepened. She no longer sought validation or approval from others, understanding that true fulfillment comes from alignment between one's inner desires and outward actions. She moved through life with a quiet confidence, grounded in the knowledge that the choices she made were hers alone, and that they were leading her toward a life of meaning, joy, and freedom. She also noticed the subtle ways her journey impacted others. Children she met began exploring creative passions they had long abandoned. Adults inspired by her choices started reclaiming dreams they had suppressed. Communities she touched grew more connected, more courageous, more willing to embrace authenticity. Emma understood that her journey was not just personal. It was a catalyst for transformation, proof that living fully is not only possible, but contagious. Through every challenge, triumph, and reflection, Emma realized that life's essence is fragile, fleeting, and miraculous. Fear, doubt, and expectation are inevitable, but they do not have to define existence. True freedom comes from reclaiming one's life, embracing uncertainty, and committing to authenticity, no matter the cost. She had discovered that living for oneself is the most profound act of courage, the ultimate gift to oneself and the world. Standing once more on a cliff overlooking the vast horizon, Emma felt the wind whip against her face, carrying the scent of the ocean and the pulse of the earth. Her heart swelled with gratitude, not just for the beauty surrounding her, but for the courage that had carried her to this point. She understood fully now that life is too short to be spent living for anyone but yourself. Every moment, every choice, every heartbeat was an opportunity to claim freedom, joy, and authenticity. Emma smiled, knowing that her journey would never truly end, because living fully is not a destination. It is a lifelong practice, a commitment to oneself, and the ultimate act of love. Emma stood at the edge of a cliff as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of gold, crimson, and violet. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying with it the scent of the ocean and the distant song of birds returning to their nests. In that moment, she felt the weight of her journey settle into her bones, a quiet understanding that every choice, every risk, every heartbeat had led her here. She had learned that life does not wait for anyone, that every second is fleeting, and that the courage to live fully is the most precious gift one could ever give oneself. She reflected on the days when fear had held her captive, when expectations and judgment had dictated her every move. She remembered the nights of doubt, the moments when she questioned her worth, her choices, her very right to claim a life of her own. And yet, through it all, she had persisted. She had embraced discomfort, leaned into uncertainty, and refused to shrink for the comfort of others. Every trial had become a teacher, every setback a stepping stone, and every moment of hesitation a lesson in courage. Emma realized that living for oneself is not an act of selfishness, but of necessity. The world will always impose rules, opinions, and expectations, but these are not the measure of a life well lived. True fulfillment comes from the alignment of heart, mind, and action, from listening to the whispers of one's own soul and following them with unwavering devotion. The world may offer applause for conformity, but it is silent witnesses who honor authenticity, who feel the tremor of freedom in another person's choices, who understand the depth of a life reclaimed. Her heart swelled with gratitude for the people who had crossed her path, the strangers who shared their wisdom, the friends who inspired her, the mentors who guided her, and the countless souls whose courage reflected her own potential. Each encounter had left an imprint, a ripple of insight that had strengthened her resolve and expanded her perspective. She understood now that life is not about accumulating accolades or possessions, but about cultivating presence, empathy, and the courage to stand unapologetically in one's truth. As the sky darkened, the first stars began to shimmer, delicate pinpricks of light against the infinite canvas of night. Emma felt an intimate connection to the universe, a reminder that life is vast, mysterious, and miraculous. She had learned that fear is inevitable, but it is not a chain, it is a signal, a compass pointing toward growth and self-discovery. Every choice to act authentically, to honor her desires, and to embrace her own path had built a life of unparalleled richness. She realized that courage is cumulative. Each small act of defiance against fear compounds into a lifetime of freedom. Emma thought about the countless people she had met along the way, those who were trapped in routines that suffocated them, those who had forgotten the sound of their own voice, those who had surrendered to fear long before they had even tried. She understood that her journey was not only for herself, it was a beacon. By claiming her life, she had illuminated the path for others, showing them that liberation is possible, that joy is attainable, and that courage can ripple through generations. Living for oneself is an act of empowerment, not only for the individual but for everyone touched by that authenticity. Her gaze swept across the horizon, where the ocean met the sky in endless possibility. She reflected on the seasons of her life, the storms she had weathered, and the mountains she had climbed, both literal and metaphorical. Each experience had brought her closer to the understanding that life is finite, unpredictable, and sacred. To wait for permission, for the perfect moment, or for others' approval is to waste the most precious resource we have, time. Choosing oneself is not reckless. It is necessary, urgent, and transformative. Emma's heart swelled with joy as she thought of the life she had reclaimed. She had shed the weight of expectation, fear, and self-doubt. She had embraced solitude, creativity, and connection. She had witnessed the beauty of vulnerability and the strength of authenticity. She had learned that freedom is not about escaping responsibility, but about embracing responsibility to oneself, honoring one's dreams, one's passions, one's truth with courage and devotion. She smiled as memories flowed through her mind, the laughter of children inspired by her courage, the tears of those who finally spoke their truths, the smiles of strangers touched by her presence, and the quiet moments of reflection that reminded her of her own resilience. Each memory was a testament to the life she had built, a life of depth, meaning, and fearless authenticity. Emma understood that the greatest legacy anyone can leave is not wealth, status, or recognition, but the courage to live fully, the bravery to embrace one's truth, and the inspiration to ignite similar courage in others. The stars multiplied overhead, the night sky vast and infinite. Emma closed her eyes, feeling the rhythm of the universe in her heartbeat, the pulse of life in her veins. She had discovered that happiness is not a destination. It is a practice, cultivated through courage, presence, and unwavering devotion to oneself. She had learned that fear is not a barrier but a companion, and that every choice to act with authenticity compounds into a lifetime of freedom, joy, and fulfillment. Emma opened her eyes, gazing at the horizon where darkness met the promise of tomorrow. She understood with absolute clarity that life is too short to live for anyone but oneself. Every moment is an opportunity to reclaim power, to embrace courage, to honor desire, and to cultivate joy. She felt a profound serenity, a radiant energy that flowed from the deepest parts of her being. Living fully, she realized, is not an option. It is a responsibility, a gift, and a legacy. And as she stood there, wind brushing her face, stars reflected in her eyes, and the vast ocean stretching infinitely before her. Emma knew this truth: life will never wait. Fear will always exist. Judgment will always appear. Expectations will always try to bind you. But freedom, joy, and the fullness of life are found in one undeniable choice: to stop shrinking, to stop waiting, and to live unapologetically, fiercely, and completely for yourself. In that choice lies the power to transform not only your own life, but the world around you.